Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast, now presented by Old Man Mountain. My name is Patrick, and I am your host. And on today's episode, I am extremely excited to welcome back to the podcast Kurt Refsnider, who is a absolute legend and OG of bikepacking. This guy has been around. He's done it all. He's won it all, or maybe not everything, but he's won a lot of things, and he is always a pleasure to talk to. This conversation was no exception. The last time Kurt was on the podcast, he was here to talk about his 2019 Colorado Divide Trail, which was a 3,300 mile bikepacking trip on a hiking trail. And to date, he's one of only a handful of people to have ever done that. Well, on today's episode, he is back to talk about his latest and biggest endeavor. He just became the first person to ever ride the new Orogenesis route that is currently being developed. It is going to be somewhere around 5,000 miles when it's all said and done. It starts at the Canadian-American border in Wyoming and heads south along primarily single-track trails all the way down to Mexico, where it intersects and continues on with the Baja Divide in Mexico. Altogether, the route boasts about 50% single track. It is an absolute monster of a route. It's been in development for over 10 years. There have been many people at the helm of this thing piecing it together, and Kurt just happened to be the first person to go out and ground truth it. So along the way, he wasn't just riding the route, he was actually route scouting, route finding, and putting tires on the ground to see if this route would even work. So it wasn't just a bike ride, it was a true bike adventure. And there's no one better to put out on a massive bike adventure like this than Kurt Refsnider. And that is going to be the main topic of today's conversation. As with all of my conversations with Kurt, I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I hope you do too. But before we get into it, let us take a moment to thank the people that made today's episode possible, starting with, no patrons today, but with your help, we can change that on the next episode. If you appreciate this work and would like to support it, a great way to do that is over on Patreon. You can find out more at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. Today's episode is also brought to us by our presented by sponsor, Old Man Mountain. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast today. I got Eric Finner from Old Man Mountain. How you doing? It's a new year, Eric.
I'm doing well. How you doing, Patrick?
Oh, I can't complain. I guess I could complain, but that's not what we're here for today. Today, we're here to talk about some new Old Man Mountain products. Not surprising. It seems like you guys are always busy rolling out something new. And so top of the year, what do y'all got rolling out so far this year?
Yeah, we got a couple things coming out right now and more to come soon. But first, we have the Atlas Rack Pack. We currently have our 9-liter bag, and now we have a 12-liter, a little bit bigger version. Add some stretch zippered pockets to the outside. Still has the crisscrossing bungee on top, and then also a air purge valve because it's a little bit bigger bag. If you're stuffing larger sleeping bags, something like that, it's nice to have that air purge to get the thing down as tight and compact as possible. Yeah. And then the other one is cargo straps. So we've got, the polyurethane cargo strap in a couple different lengths and our nice bright green with a darker green buckle and, classy, stylish piece.
Classy, stylish, and it all goes together and looks very classy when you put it all together. For people who don't know, the Atlas Rack Pack, why don't you break that down? What is it? So now you have the new one is the 12-liter. You've had a 9-liter in the line, but break that down. Like, what is that for people who aren't already familiar with that product line?
Yeah, so the Atlas is basically a seat bag. Picture the same shape, but then adapted to mount right on top of the deck of a rack. So you get the benefits of it being super stable on a rack. You get some frame sheets built within it so that it gives you space for a dropper. Uh, can move up and down no problem. Keeps it away from swaying back and forth like a seat pack does, and then you also get all this crisscross bungee on top. So it has the same kind of entry as a seat bag, the general form factor, but then with a bunch of extra benefits in the function.
Yeah, I like how the bag is like angled like the seat tube, so it can really get tucked up underneath the seat pretty close, and then the accessory pouches on either side, and it looks like that. So that's a harness. It looks like, and then you have the dry bag that could be removed.
No, they're a part of the bag. So they're welded onto it, nice and secure. Uh, and then, but yeah, it is different fabrics is what you're seeing. So we've got
Oh, okay.
reinforcements onto a thinner, lighter weight fabric. So we get the benefit of like easy to roll closure, but then we've got this strong, stiff hypalon that's going to compress the bag a little more evenly, and then also reinforce those contact points for the straps that hold it onto the deck.
Oh yeah, okay. I see that now. Very nice, man. And this podcast is coming out Friday the 29th of January. Do I understand correctly that that's the day that these products are being released and will be available on your website?
Yep. Yeah, they're on the site right now and ready to go.
Awesome. Well, tell people where to go to find those and all the other great products that you make.
Yeah, oldmanmountain.com, nice and simple. And if you want to see what we've got going on social media, Old Man Mountain Racks.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming on, Eric. I know that y'all have more products coming out a little bit later, so I'm sure we'll be talking about those soon. But thanks for coming on the podcast today, man. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Anytime, buddy. All right, that is it. The bills have been paid, and now it is time to get to my chat with Kurt Refsnider. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. Battling a little bit of a cold today, it feels like. But aside from that, doing well.
Luckily, it waited till after your trip. Maybe did you wind up getting sick on your trip at all, or did you miss all that?
No, not at all. Trying to think. I don't think I had anything. And Claire and I got really lucky in Baja and didn't have any stomach bugs or anything like that along the way either, which seemed to plague so many people at least once along the way. So
yeah, I've been lucky in Latin America so far. I can't recall. Oh, one time things were a little questionable, but nothing like too drastic. My girlfriend, on the other hand, usually has one good episode per trip, and I'm sure she'll love me sharing that information.
Oh yeah, some people definitely are much more likely to get that, it seems like. I don't know whether it's eating habits or just sensitive stomachs or bad luck or what.
Yeah. Well, everybody's body's different. Some people have knee pain. Yep. Some people have back pain, shoulder pain. Some people have tummy problems. I mean, I just think we're all different human animals and experience things differently. Maybe is the most simplified answer.
Yeah. But how have you been? It's been, it's probably been a couple years since we chatted on here on this forum.
I know. Yeah, I think I was thinking back. I didn't go back and look it up, but I think it's been a couple of years. So yeah, it's been a while. Been busy, man. That's a loaded question, but ultimately good. And yeah, the Texas Showdown series has been taking the lion's share of my focus, just building a race series and route developing and all that kind of stuff. Which we're going to be talking about a massive project that you were at least part of, and so you can relate to that. And very excited. I don't know if we can put this out on the internet, but I was excited to get your email about West Texas Showdown. That
can be public. That's I'm not keeping anything secret that I'm doing this year. Mostly I just don't have a lot planned for this year yet, but that is one of those things that I'm like, cool. I know I'm going to be excited to race late in the year this year, so that's what I want to be part of. And after I heard stories from last year and looked carefully at what the route was like, because I hadn't actually looked in detail at what you were using for a route before this last one happened, the first edition. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, cool. There's some really good stuff in there. Some hard trail in there. So
some really hard trail. Yeah. It's not just a bike ride. It's a little bit of a bike adventure thrown into a little bit of everything. Yeah.
that's what the state park is like there. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to that one come November.
Yeah, you've been out there. I have to say that, did you understand my email about that section east? Just directly east of the state
that
park?
giant, weird kind of rural residential area.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
it's all private
north.
land.
Yeah. Yeah, it was unclear if I was allowed to be riding through there or not. Like nothing actually says like roads closed to non-residents or anything like that. And so it kind of seems like maybe they're okay with, or at least not vocally opposed to people just out passing through on it, but having an event is a whole different story, or telling people to go ride out there is a whole different story too.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And I think it depends on who you talk to out there at Terlingua Ranch, right? Like, because I mean, you're dealing with hundreds of different property owners. Some of them are cool with it and others are less cool with it. But I'm with you, man. I spent, years out there scouting. The first time I went to Terlingua Ranch was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I've been all around Terlingua Ranch. I think I've seen just about every road there is to see out there. And I have yet to come across a no trespassing or a private property sign. I've seen them like off the road, like, hey, this is private property.
Yeah, like don't come
here.
on my land, but not like these roads are private.
Right. And that's something I brought up to them, some of the locals, and they were like, oh no, there's plenty of private, no trespassing signs. I'm like, I don't know.
Interesting.
I didn't see them. So I think that they could, and it's why I actually brought it up was I think it's good. I brought it up on the last podcast too, because I think a lot of people have been trespassing, and I don't think that there's really good, clear information out there. And yeah, as a route scouter yourself, you kind of know how that goes. Like sometimes it just takes boots in the ground and talking to locals and finding out what is the real situation. And that just happens to be a part of Texas, at least, that there's a lot of ambiguity and a lot of he said, she said. And I think I do have the clear answer. And that is, the answer is that all of those roads are privately held. And I've confirmed that with there's a ranch manager that like manages all 400,000 acres. And I also talked to like the city planning people, and they've confirmed it's private property. So, access is whatever those landowners say it is. And I think you'll get a different response.
Like, who manages the roads out there?
Yeah, so Terlingua Ranch manages the roads. The property owners pay into some kind of fund, and then POA manages the roads. And I've explained this before, but I'm also a real estate agent, been doing real estate for 15 years. And I'm very familiar with the way POAs work. And typically, the POA owns the roads and they maintain the roads. In this scenario, it's different. The homeowners or the property owners own the roads, and then they just pay the POA to maintain them. And that's all the POA does is maintain the roads.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they
anyway,
have no authority over the road.
Yeah, I figured I'd let you know and kind of put it out on the internet too, since you had sent me that. And that was where the original route went. And I explained it all in the last podcast, but I had to redo about 40% of the route once we came across those issues. And I came in it from every single angle possible, and they were all roadblocks for now. But, I'm hoping with like good conversations, good relationships, maybe we can unlock some of that stuff in the future. But for now, like you said, we can't host a race there. So the other route is great. I think we'll keep it pretty much the same for 2026. So you're in for a little bit of adventure, but I know you don't mind that.
I'm stoked for it. Yeah.
Cheers, man.
That's what I'd rather have.
Well, let's get into you. We already did a podcast, so anybody wants to go back and get an intro to Kurt Refsnider. I know we covered a lot of like kind of your background and stuff in that episode.
Yep.
And we got a lot to talk about today. So let's jump right in. I think if my math is, you're a little over 30 days back from finishing your big scouting trip. Is that right? I think it's like 32 days, something in that neighborhood.
I think wrapped up mid-December, and now it's January 20th, it looks like. So just over a month.
How are you adjusting? How do you typically adjust back into, normal life, home life? A lot of people, including myself, struggle with that. How are you managing?
Yeah, I get that question so often. Like, what's it like transitioning back to, day-to-day life? Or do you struggle with like depression after a
Mhm.
journey like that? Because a lot of people do have some sort of like legitimate depression symptoms after those sorts of journeys. And I don't know. I feel like my transition out of things like that and into things like that always just feels like overwhelmingly busy. Like there's not usually good time for kind of like uh, I don't know, easing back in or anything like that. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm back in it right
Yeah.
away. And, part of it is just that, like, on the road for what this was 4.5 months that I was out on the trail and got back. And there's, an overflowing email inbox and all these conversations of things that I should have been tending to, 6 weeks before. And they just kind of got pushed down into the bottom of my inbox that whole time because I was distracted by making forward progress on the route every day. And then this one was also even further complicated that it was finishing up right before the holiday season. And so basically it was like
Yeah.
wrap up, reach the southern tip of Baja. Claire and I had a day and a half, I think, there before we flew back to San Diego. And then my van was over in Tecate on the US side of the border. And so a friend drove us back over there to get the van, drove to Prescott, spent 3 days there, flew to New York, spent a week there with Claire's family. I flew back to Arizona, had 10 days. No, not even 10 days, like a week there. And now I'm up in Idaho, Wyoming for the next 3 months. And so it's just
Yeah.
like this, like straight into continued travel chaos of a very different sort and holiday family time. And so it's I almost feel like it's a struggle to fully process everything that's happened when you just get thrown back into life like that. And I don't even really feel like I have time to like feel depressed or feel a withdrawal or something from like that because there's so many immediate things. And maybe that's just the way that my life ends up behaving after something like that, that I've been, normally pretty busy and put that stuff off until when it absolutely needs to be dealt with at the end of a trip like that. But it's not easy. And I think it's, I almost feel like after a trip like that, you need a vacation to just recover from
Yeah.
the stresses and the mental side of a trip like that and just the fatigue after being in the saddle or hiking or whatever it is for a long time. And if you're straight back into life, like you don't have that time to recover. And so you're just kind of like tired and frazzled and straight back into it. So I don't know. I think that's something I always want to be better about. I mean, almost like having time to just debrief on my own.
Yeah.
And it's hard when there's a real life you have to get back to and don't have the luxury of, a week or 2 weeks of just easing back.
Yeah. No, I actually relate to that a lot too. Is I often don't feel like I even get a chance to reminisce and relive my trips as much as I would like to. That's just things are happening so fast that I usually give myself. It's just there was the trip I did in Oaxaca. I guess it was 2024 now. That was like the biggest impact, cultural shock coming back to reality. But usually other than that, I give myself about a day. I give myself a 1 day vacation to like mourn and reflect and, prepare myself emotionally and mentally for like, okay, tomorrow you have to like flip a switch and you've got to go and do all these other things. But I usually give myself a day and that's about it. And then it's right back to it.
I was just going to say, it really does feel like a switch getting flipped from like being on the trail and in this like need to keep moving relatively steadily every day. And, you get up and your mission is cover ground, like got to get another 45 miles or 55 miles south or whatever it might be. And then that's so different from day to day life where it's like you get up and there's this to-do list and things that need to be done and cross those off instead of crossing off miles. And so,
it's a totally different. It's a culture.
Yeah.
It's not a culture shock. It's it's just a shock to the system. It's everything that is the opposite of what you've been doing for the last number of months. It's like this is So flipping a switch is like, all right, we're in this whole different version of myself now, and it could be a really harsh transition. But yeah, so I was looking on Track Leaders, and it says it was 135 days. But I'm curious because I'm guessing you took like a pause in there somewhere, but maybe you could break down like how many days you were actually out there.
Yeah, so I headed up to the Washington border, the Canadian border of Washington, in August 3rd, I guess, and started the ride down Orogenesis August 4th, and then I had a handful of days off scattered along the way. I mean, you just need to take breaks along the course of a big journey like that. Sometimes they're due to weather, like Washington it was really hot, like a lot of days that were up in the upper 90s or 100 down low. And so there were a couple days that were just like wait for a particularly hot spell to move past a little bit, and stop for a couple days in Packwood for a overnighter event that the Orogenesis Collective was putting on there with some folks that came to celebrate the launch of the first piece of the Orogenesis Route in southern Washington. And then I had a couple days off and scattered along the way in Oregon, and then took a week off in Northern California. My partner Claire came out, and we hung out in the La Sierra area. And most of that, unfortunately, was just us sitting next to each other, staring at our computers, her working, me working, trying to catch up on things that again hadn't gotten done that should have while I was out in Washington and Oregon. And then I moved pretty steadily through California, which California's huge, and the route isn't very direct through it. It's pretty circuitous in places. So that was another like 5 weeks, I think, at least, maybe 6 weeks to get through California. And then at the Mexico border, I took a week off there, kind of recovering, getting ready for the whole Baja part of it. And then Claire drove out there to meet me to join for the whole Baja Divide section of the route. And so basically had 2 1-week breaks along the way. And aside from that, I don't think I ever had more than a couple days in a row off. And so I don't actually know the total number of riding days versus rest days, but I probably had a total of like maybe 3 weeks off in that whole time span, maybe a little more than that, 3.5 or something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
definitely wasn't.
That's a big commitment.
It was 4.5 months total, and obviously I wasn't racing. Like there was no focus on speed whatsoever. Right. It was more just the kind of the seasonality. Like gotta get through the Southern Sierra before winter arrives, and there literally was a 16-inch dump of snow in the high southern end of the Sierra where the route goes about a week and a half after I got through that area, and that basically closed that section of the route for the season. So I was like just ahead of where I needed to be to beat the arrival of winter in that section. And then for Baja, we were just trying to finish before the holidays. And so those were kind of the time goals. Yeah. And so it was definitely like motivated. Yeah, that was about it. But still, it was enough to keep me like feeling like I need to keep moving pretty steadily out there. And I was sleeping long nights most of the time, especially in Baja as the days got so short at that time of year.
Sure.
But yeah, there's no focus on speed. A lot of people ask me like, "Oh, are you going for the FKT?" Like, no, like this. For one, the route's going to be changing every year for like years and years to come as it evolves and improves and new trail pieces get built. But I don't do these long trips like that with a focus on speed whatsoever. Yeah. It's not part of the experience I want.
I was probably going to dig into this a little bit later in the conversation, but also you're developing a route. So I assume there's some note taking, some documenting, some photography, all that kind of stuff that so speed can't be, top of mind when you're vetting something for the first time.
Yeah. So the route, the Orogenesis Route has been, you can go into a little background on the development.
Yeah, you're itself. You're on cue. Let's talk about, first of all, how do you say it? Let's get the pronunciation right.
So Orogenesis.
Orogenesis.
Genesis, like creation of or building, and then oro referring to mountains. And so it's actually a geologic term for the process of mountain building. And, creating a massive single track route like this is kind of like a mountain building process. Like it's a long, slow, tedious process that takes a lot of force, a lot of people involved, a lot of energy. And so the creation of the route has been in the works for, I think 8 years now. It was a kind of fostered under the wing of Bikepacking Routes for a while. Now it's spun off as its own nonprofit called the Orogenesis Collective. But it was a vision that a few people kind of had separately. Gabe Tiller, who's the visionary and creator of the Oregon Timber Trail, the kind of single track focused route across Oregon that's been around for almost a decade now, I guess. He created that route, and somewhere along the lines, he kind of had this mental realization of like, oh, what if we continued the route north through Washington to Canada? Oh, and then it could continue south into California to Mexico. And Oregon's a very small piece of that massive thing.
Yeah.
But then down in California, Chris McNamara was working on a route vision kind of from the Tahoe area south and maybe connecting to Baja. And I don't know if he had a clear vision of like what it was going to be, but he had a vision for a really long single track focused route there. And then he and Gabe got to talking and realized that, oh, that could actually, we're kind of envisioning something very similar. Let's work together on this. And then the momentum started to grow. They brought on a whole bunch of volunteers that were, the whole mission is to kind of scout what potential trails are there that could be included to link together and make this long single track route all the way across the country, and then connect to the existing Baja Divide route, which obviously isn't single track. So the whole nature of the route changes once you hit the Mexico border. But then it was 6 years basically of folks scouting on the ground, looking at these different trails, trying to figure out which ones should be used, which ones maybe shouldn't, which might be great to use if they had some restoration work or clearing deadfall or things like that, where there's gaps, that there's just no suitable trails that could be used. And those are all areas that have been identified for future trail construction in the coming years, decades, something like that. And so by last year, I guess, by the year before I wrote it, the route was kind of coming together, not like a finalized version yet, but enough that they're like, okay, cool, this is getting close to being maybe like a beta version of the route. And it's a just shy of, I think, half single track for the US part of it. And that's with zero trail construction. That's literally just linking together existing trail that's there. And there were probably, I don't know, maybe 20 scouts that were really heavily involved in figuring all that out. The organization realized pretty quickly folks really like the idea of helping scout something like that. And the reality is there's an awful lot of like bushwhacking and checking out trails that turn out to be pretty horrendous and maybe aren't the way through, or at least not right now the way through. So it's not all, fun and glory when you're out trying to scout stuff like that. And I had very little involvement in any of that. I've just been kind of paying attention to this route project and trying to be supportive of the vision over the years. And I helped with a little bit of scouting in the last year when I was out in that area of Northern California a couple summers ago. But that was about it. And so I didn't have specific plans to ride the route. Like I didn't have this vision like, oh, cool, when it's ready to go, I'm going to ride it. I want to be the first person to ride it or anything like that. But early last year, or maybe it was late the prior winter, I was talking to Gabe about just like where it's at. And he was like, I think we're pretty close to maybe being ready for some test riders. And he mentioned they really wanted to have someone or the first people to ride it, people that they, experienced folks doing that kind of thing, folks that aren't going to, epic if things don't actually pan out well and, maybe make the route look like something that isn't all that attractive because of people epicking out there on it right off the bat. And so I gave that some thought and decided like, oh, cool, if it's close to ready, then why not? Rode the Continental Divide Trail a couple years ago. That was a fantastic experience. And why not try another kind of single track focused route across the country? Because at this point, Orogenesis is the first kind of across the country mountain bike route. Like there's the Great Divide mountain bike route, which is mountain bikes are the bike to ride for that, but it really is like a dirt road, gravel road route for the most part. There's almost no single track on it. And it's, I've ridden it 3 times. It's fantastic, but it's a very different beast from a single track route. And then there's the Continental Divide Trail, which is a hiking route. And it's like 70% open to bikes, but it is hard. Like I think now there's 5 people that have ridden across the country on slightly different versions of the Continental Divide Trail. And it is absolutely burly. It's obviously not something that has captured the attention of the bikepacking community because of how hard it is. There's fantastic sections for bikepacking, but doing the whole thing is a pretty monumental feat. And so, I was thinking about Orogenesis, like, well, I don't think it can. I hope it's not as hard as the CDT. I hope they're not choosing to use like the hardest trails through every place along the way, and that'll actually be a route that's more reasonable to ride than the CDT, and something that the masses, like the single track loving bikepacking masses, are going to really want to ride. And so I was a little nervous going into it. Like, I hope I'm able to confirm afterward that like other people are going to enjoy this, other people are going to want to ride this. And then I'd wanted to ride the Baja Divide for a while now, and having that linked in as part of this full thing, I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I have the opportunity, like I have the time to do that next year. I have the support from sponsors. Like, I should probably just make it happen. And so, yeah, like you were saying with the kind of collecting information along the way and kind of cataloging some of the stuff, like I was given basically a GPS track all the way across the country with no other information associated with it. And that's kind of where the route is at this point, that they've been putting a ton of energy into the question of like what trails should be part of it. And the next step is like, okay, well, once we know that, then we have to figure out like where are the resupply locations, where's the water for people along the way, like all those things that people need to actually go out and tackle something like this, whether it's the whole thing or pieces of it. And the project hasn't gotten to that stage yet, so it was a ton of planning on my part to figure all that stuff out, and then was taking a lot of notes when I was out there, especially on water sources. Like that was the main thing. But also, when you roll into a town and meet people that are stoked to have bikepackers come to their business, whether it's a bike shop or a cafe or a little store or a place to stay, like making notes of those, because those are always such wonderful experiences when you get to a town and there's people that are stoked to see you and help you out and have you be a customer of their business. So taking notes of that sort of thing, and then all the little pieces along the way where there's like, ooh, this doesn't actually connect the way that they thought it might, or it hadn't been scouted on the ground. There's a lot of little connections that didn't have eyes on the ground yet. And so those were the pieces where there was the most uncertainty, getting from one awesome trail to the next awesome trail that might be 10 miles, kind of weaving through a valley. And, some sections were on like Aqueduct Road in California. And it's hard to know, like some pieces are public, some are closed to the public. And so there were little bits here and there that I ran into, like, oh, this way won't actually go. The route will have to be corrected here. But most of those were all very obvious solutions to fix those little issues here and there. So making lots of notes of that sort of thing.
How much of it, like, I mean, obviously it ties into Baja Divide. How much of it, ties into like Tour Divide, PCT, CDT? Were y'all like trying to weave all that stuff together? Or were you trying to avoid those? Like what was, and it sounds like you weren't as involved in the development side of it, but do you know what the thought process was there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the focus was on trying to find really fun mountain biking, like legitimate, good single track, and link that together. And so for Washington, there aren't any established like north-south bikepacking routes through Washington, and the PCT is in like absolutely entirely closed to bicycles. You're not allowed on any section on a bike. Yeah, so so Washington was pretty much all new routes. I think there are probably little pieces here and there that had been incorporated in other loops that people ride, but most of it was kind of newly linked together stuff. Oregon is pretty much the Oregon Timber Trail, which Gabe had created years before, and there's some differences between what's the official Oregon Timber Trail single track route today and what Orogenesis is likely going to follow. There's more single track on Orogenesis. It's hard trail in places, but really cool section. So it gets off some of the dirt roads in places and onto more trail. And then California is, I mean, it's a big mix of all sorts of things. Like in Southern California, it uses some pieces of the Stagecoach 400 bikepacking route that's been around for a long time. In the Sierra, the eastern, so the route has two options. One that goes down the eastern Sierra and kind of high desert riding, and then another on the west side of the Sierra. And I went down the east side because I love desert riding, and especially high deserts. And that one uses pieces of the Caldera 500 route that's been around for a long time. And what else? The Tahoe area, there's a number of different bikepacking routes that people have created in that area. And the Lake Trail, the kind of single track route that Chris has created. around that. So that's kind of what's incorporated through that zone. But yeah, so I think kind of using well-known or well-established bikepacking routes in places, but so much of this, there wasn't much established already. And so that's where all the scouting had to come in to figure out like what trails are there. And, so many of the bikepacking routes that have been created by folks out in those areas don't necessarily use a lot of trail. It's a lot of like dirt road, deep road type stuff. And so the goal of this whole project, like I said, was single track. So that was something in places they're trying to find kind of new connecting trails through.
Yeah. How many total miles? I know it's not done yet. I've seen some different numbers out there, but what's the number that you want to put out on the internet right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think my mileage for the whole thing was like 4,700. So I think it was like just over 3,000 for the US part of it, and then like right around 1,600 for Baja. And I think the final number for the amount of climbing or I was really thinking about it, the amount of descending, because the route has so many huge, really awesome descents. It's 500,000 feet, which is mind-boggling. Even having done that, I still can't believe that it's that much. 500,000 in one.
Is this I mean, you are no stranger. You're one of the most like qualified, experienced people I've ever had on the podcast. I maybe ever have on the podcast. But is this your largest bike expedition to date?
Yeah, it was. I think when I read the Continental Divide Trail, that was a little under 3 months, and that was my longest one prior to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is pretty wild because you're not only going into like your biggest, trip, bikepacking trip, it's also a scouting trip. So it's going to come with like a lot of uncertainty. Do you get nervous at this stage in your career with your level of experience? Like, do you have apprehension going to stuff, or is it just because I could see the flip side of this coin. It's like, and I relate to this, is like I love to get myself a little bit over my head. I want to be out in real wilderness environments because I really love the opportunity to test myself. It's like, okay, I think that I'm pretty capable, and you don't often get a chance to really test the full arsenal of your toolkit. So I could also see someone at your level being like, oh no, sign me up, like bring on any challenge.
Yeah. When I went into it, I think I was apprehensive that I didn't want it to be as hard as the Continental Divide Trail was. Like, I love that experience riding the CDT. I think it's still after Orogenesis, the CDT was still at the top of my like most beloved adventures that I've had. But it was so hard and so demanding, and so physically challenging that I didn't want Orogenesis to be that. Like, I didn't want that to be the way that I was spending my months out on that trail. And I didn't want, since that route's being created for the broader bikepacking community, I really didn't want it to be that hard for the good of everyone. And so I think I was apprehensive. Like, I didn't think it was going to be that hard, but I didn't really know for sure because no one's pieced it all together and ridden all of it yet. And I think I was also apprehensive and kind of nervous for Washington State specifically. It was the first state I rode, and on paper, and Gabe also agreed based on what he had seen and looking at the numbers, that Washington is the hardest single chunk of the route. And so it's always a little intimidating going into something huge and knowing you're getting the hardest part of it right off the bat and not knowing exactly how hard that was going to be. And it was like, what was the number? I think 130,000 feet of climbing in 700 miles. So
almost
it's like
200
slightly
feet.
longer than the Colorado Trail with twice as much climbing as the Colorado Trail.
Yeah, it's almost 200 feet per mile, if my math is correct. It's right under 200 feet.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
You said 130,000 feet for 700 miles?
Yep.
Yeah. So it'd be like a little under 200, something like that. It'd be pretty close.
It was hard. Like, so much. There were so many climbs that were like 4,000 feet, mostly moto trail, which is just hard single track riding usually. And then a 4,000 foot descent. And then you repeat, out of that drainage, another one and another one and another one and another one. But it also was phenomenal riding. Like, it was one of those pieces of route that you ride and you're like, gosh, this is hard. And it's so good, like so worth the effort to do that if you like that kind of trail. Then it was a huge relief to get through Washington, be like, okay, cool. I'm worked right now, but that I think was the hardest big piece of the route. So it should get a little bit mellower from here. So I don't know. I don't know that like that was my biggest concern going into it. I think I was also a little nervous about being kind of like this on this objective driven trip for 4.5 months. Like I'd never done something that long before and didn't know if I was going to enjoy it the whole time. Cause like I do these things for fun. Like I want to enjoy it most of the time. And I didn't know if, just being out there for that long would wear on me or, if I decided the route wasn't a style that I liked, maybe I just not want to keep going. But fortunately that didn't turn out to be the case. It was fantastic. I did enjoy myself almost all of the time.
Because I mean, you were, I'm sure you were also out there for fun. And also you were kind of on the clock the whole time you were out there. Like, you still had an obligation to, you couldn't just, like, let's say you're just on a fun trip. There might be a bullshit section. And you're like, I'll just, cut around that. But like, you didn't have that luxury. Yeah. You had to take the bullshit route, make sure that it went. If it didn't go, you had to go around, find a reroute. Like so you were on the clock the whole time. And so I could see like the question mark of, is that going to be fun? Am I going to be able to like enjoy this experience and do the route, the service that it needs, like while I'm out there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That definitely having that kind of that purpose is like, I love that, like having a reason to do something like this beyond the kind of selfish, like, oh, I just want to go on a big adventure for myself. Like I do really want a lot of my trips to have some sort of bigger purpose like that, but it does add stress to it. And there were places where I'm like, I don't really want to go over here, but I should go check that out because we need to figure out a way through this part. Or there was, I think this one of the single hardest days for me of the entire ride was a completely flat rail trail in Northern California, kind of connecting through these high valleys to get over to the Sierra. And it was one of those like I even had notes when I'd been going through and doing my homework on the route, like this next section should be fast. It's all rail trail and almost no climbing. And then I get out there and it's like, okay, rail trail isn't really the right word for it. It's like abandoned rail grade with the ballast still on there in places. And so you've got like coarse rocks that you're sinking into. There were places that were fenced off by ranchers that graze their cattle out there. So it's like not closed to the public, but you have hop fences and, you're never quite like I had to do some research while I was out there to make sure it was okay to be there. And yeah, it was like 80 miles of really demanding riding on this rail grade. And some of it was pretty cool, but a lot of it was just like, man, this is hard. Oh, I can see a highway right over that. Like I was parallel to a highway for half of that. It was like half a mile away. And I was like, I could just go ride that and be so much faster. Exactly. But I should just stay on this. And then after I was there, I mentioned that to Gabe. And he's like, oh man, yeah, that was one of the sections I didn't get around to scouting. I'd heard horror stories about it, so I didn't check it out myself. So I'm like, oh no. So I was the first person to actually ride the whole thing. And it turns out it is going to be a rail trail for the whole length of it. It was a land trust that bought it, but they just haven't gotten around to basically turning it into an actual trail yet. Yeah. So it will be getting much better in time, but it's not quite there yet. And so there were days like that where like, I would just go over there if I wasn't trying to follow this route so closely. And then there were other days where it's like, okay, I'm in a giant fire smoke plume. Like I just need to get through this as fast as possible. And, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I should stay on the actual route, but I just need to get out of this because this is like the worst air quality I've ever ridden in. And so there's one stretch in Oregon where I just bailed out to a highway and, hammered for half a day to get south far enough to do that. And there were a few wildfire closures that had to get bypassed too. So it wasn't 100% true to that line, but it is going to be ever evolving. And there were a few places that I checked out other options along the way that I had heard or knew about that I thought might actually be better riding or better trails to include than where the route currently goes. And so got to do some extra kind of bonus miles on Fun Trail along the way too.
Hey, Kurt, I'm going to pause you. I have 1 minute and 17 seconds left.
Mm-hmm. I see that. Yep.
Let me see if I can. I might not be up to date. I'm going to see if we can do this while I'm talking. Sign in.
Okay, cool.
I don't know what account I'm on here. let's scratch this and let me fiddle with this for like 5 minutes and then we'll hop back on. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that's just fine.
I'll email you.
Okay, cool. I will keep an eye for that.
Word. There we go. I realized my folly. I had an old, one of my cards had like fraud alert or whatever, and this was associated with that card. So I had it set on auto bill pay, but I just realized
so it wasn't renewing.
It wasn't. Yeah, and this is my first podcast since that happened. And anyway, here we are. So now we're good.
Cool.
Thanks for letting me troubleshoot that.
No problem at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, I mean, we were talking about, some of the mishaps and unknowns that come along with this style of riding. And it's not a style of riding that most people are going to do. Most people are going to go on vetted routes. And when you were talking about Washington, one thing I was thinking is like the nice thing about you going and others who will scout is like, if you're in a hard section, you know what's coming, right? You know that the route goes, you know that there's relief coming, there'll be more beta. And so there's a lot of like mental kind of ease that comes with that. But for you didn't know that. You really had no idea, which roads were going to go. You never knew, if you were going to have 40 miles to the next town or 100 miles or what it was. I mean, you might have an idea, but you knew that there was big question marks. So like, how did you, I'm curious to get some, information about like how you prepared differently for this from a planning standpoint, how much extra like food, water, gear, like what did you do differently for this style of riding that was maybe a little bit more to account for those unknowns?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think that was part of what drew me to this route was that I hadn't actually ever ridden a bike in Washington. So that was entirely new riding to me. Oregon, I had done a couple cyclocross races, I think, outside of Portland years ago. And that's the only riding I'd ever done in Oregon, which I think was at like some sort of like vehicle racetrack or something like that was the venue. I can't even remember at this point. And then California, I've ridden a little bit in the La Sierra area and helped with that little bit of scouting on the route, the Orogenesis route in that area. And then I've ridden the Stagecoach route in Southern California. And that's pretty much all I've ridden in California. So pretty much the entirety of the route was not only like new to me trail, but new to me terrain, like places I had never really spent time before or ridden a bike. So that was really exciting. And it's also very different from, like when I rode the Continental Divide Trail, I've spent so much time in the Continental Divide corridor, whether it's hiking, other bikepacking trips, riding, racing, Tour Divide through that 3 times. Like I knew that the geography of that corridor really well. I knew a lot of the towns. And that was not the case at all for Orogenesis. And that's the US part of it. Like Baja then is thrown a different culture and different language and everything is different down there. So that was even more foreign to me. So I was really drawn to doing a big route in a region that was so unfamiliar to me. But it does come with that added challenge of like, okay, you don't know anything about any of these towns, any of the riding, like, looking at route information or like talking to Gabe or other route scouts, like they just throw around names of like well-known trails and, oh, you'll love this trail. I'd like make notes and then go try to find that trail described somewhere and like, what is it? So the whole planning process was really time consuming for this one, even though the route, that route line had been probably 90% scouted at least, so there was confidence that it was passable. Like I would be able to get through most of that. And if not, hopefully it wouldn't be too big of an ordeal to find a way through. But not having any information about resupplies or especially water, because there's so many really dry sections of the route, like that takes a lot of homework to figure out. And so my basic approach to figuring something like this out is just a really deep dive into Ride with GPS and getting all the route pieces in there, then starting to look through and trying to figure out like, okay, this chunk between, say, the Canadian border and like Kashmir, one of the towns that I knew would be a reliable resupply. Like let's just look at this piece and figure out, okay, how much of it looks like it's single track, how much looks like it's maybe Jeep road, how much dirt road, how much pavement along the way. And because, if it's 200 miles of mostly trail, that's going to be so much slower than 200 miles that half of it's dirt road or something like that. So try to figure out for each piece what that kind of ratio is to get a general idea of how much time might it take to get through there. And then figuring out how much climbing there is for each section, because, you can ride 100 miles of flat single track in, a couple days, maybe pretty comfortably. In Washington, 100 miles might have, oh, geez, what, like 25,000 or 30,000 feet of climbing in that distance. And so that might take 3 or 4 days to get through, depending on trail conditions and everything like that. So there's the kind of like the just figuring out the physical characteristics of the riding and the terrain. And then the next step is like, okay, where are there towns along the way to resupply? Do a little homework on that to figure out how those fit into these different pieces of route and how far apart towns are. And this route is pretty cool that, there's a lot of hard riding along the way, a lot of hard terrain, but the towns for resupplying generally are spaced pretty close together, like every 2 to 3 days for a lot of it. And so that makes it really accessible. There's some awesome single track routes out there that are more like 4 days between resupplies for a strong rider, something like that. And when you get up into that like north of 3 days, that's more food than a lot of bike packers want to carry or can like physically have the space on their bikes for. And then especially if it's drier terrain, you have to have space for water.
And you're thinking about a single track route, you're thinking about weight management and all that stuff too. Yeah. So full suspension. So I know you were on full suspension. We'll get into bikes in a second, but they don't have as much cargo capacity and whatnot. So there's all these considerations when you're building a route.
Yeah. So I think that is a highlight of the route, is just that the attention that was paid to making sure that there are resupply opportunities fairly regularly spaced and not at big intervals along the way. But water then was the next big challenge for figuring out, like, you can't just like look at Google Earth and zoom in and be like, oh, there's a creek, that'll have water. And so, also not being familiar with these different places and knowing like, oh, do the streams in this area normally flow in late summer, early fall? Or is it, some of those attributes that just like other places I've spent a lot of time, I could tell you like, oh yeah, one of those streams in that little stretch there, that'll definitely have water because of the seasonality of precipitation or something like that. And so there's a lot of homework looking at satellite images. In Google Earth, you can look at satellite images from different dates in recent years. And so, try to find photos, satellite imagery from fall, and see if a few different years there was water flowing in those places. And
still
then
not 100% reliable, but that is a smart idea. I hadn't thought of that before. I knew that feature was available, but that's a good one, Kurt. That's a pro tip right there.
It's tedious, but it's important to do. Ride with GPS also has that new layer with community POIs that have been kind of half vetted in terms of like stuff that might be useful for other riders. And I think one of the most common things you see in those POIs are water sources. And so there were some that, riding through, like the Mount St. Helens area, I remember one I found out there, like hand pump at this trailhead. Strange pump, but it works and is reliable. I was like, okay, cool. I would never have known that was there. There's no creek in that area, but so you can figure stuff out like that. And I got there, and sure enough, it was the weirdest hand pump I've ever seen, but water came out of it.
Lived up to its name or its reputation.
Yeah. And then for sections of the route that follow or kind of are close to the Pacific Crest Trail, there's an app for the Pacific Crest Trail itself. It's the Western Wildlands route and the Bears Ears loops that I worked on putting together. We have through Bikepacking Routes access to the Far Out app for those, and that app company has apps for these other long hiking trails. And so they have water sources in them, and the really cool feature with those water sources, you can actually click on them and see updates from trail users. And they, some of those trail users are really good about updating, like, oh, cool, I was here on the 8th and it was flowing. I was here on the 10th and there was just a trickle left. Probably won't be reliable next week. Things like that. Yeah. And so
that's super helpful.
That was really helpful for some sections of the route in the more desert areas, especially in California, Southern California. So it was a big time consuming process to work through all of that. And, I probably put way more energy into that sort of thing than some folks would. But, I didn't have any issues with running out of food when I was out there. I only ran low on water once, kind of unexpectedly. And there were a few places I knew that there just won't be much water. And so I need to stock up, carry 7 liters or something like that. And that, I was happy that I had done the homework ahead of time to know that, this is where the next reliable water source is. And if I can't find anything in between, here's maybe an option that's like 5 or 10 miles off route that, I don't want to descend 2,000 feet to find water in a river that flows. But if it's an emergency, like I know where that is now.
Yeah.
So that was another kind of contingency piece in the planning.
Well, you're really, you're providing a really good anecdote for something I say often, which is the time to plan is when you're at home. Like you want to go out and be able to enjoy the trip and ride your bike, and be there for the experience. Now, obviously, you were also route scouting in real time, but the more of that planning you can do ahead of time, you're just doing your future self a favor. So I think it's good for people to hear how much prep work you did going into something like this so that you could plan for every contingency and at least have some resource and options and bailouts and, emergency situations. And that going ahead of time, it just saves you so much headache and frustration in the field,
Yeah. And those situations where you are running out of food unexpectedly or running out of water unexpectedly, like those turn into, legitimate safety hazards also. And so those are just things that, if you can put some time into preventing yourself from most likely running into those, then yeah, I think that's time really well spent.
All right. I wanted to ask you kind of a fun question, not exactly related to the route, but again, I read on your website, 23 years mountain biking, and you've been in the ultra cycling for 12 years. I don't know how updated your website is, but
not very updated anymore.
All right. But you've been around a while. You've done a lot. Here's my fun question. You're out on Orogenesis. Did I say it right?
Orogenesis.
I'm going to see Orogenesis. You're out on Orogenesis and, you have to go into a gas station or a grocery store. You're going to stock up for 3 days. What are some meals or some foods that are your go-tos in like a backcountry, not the backpacker meals, nothing fancy. Like what is your, I'm halfway into this thing. I just need food. What are you going for?
Oh man, it depends what I've been eating leading up to that and what I'm tired of. I think one of the downsides of having been doing this sort of thing for a long time is there's just certain foods that I've eaten way too much of over the years and I just don't even want anymore. Like a lot of candy bars at this point, like they're just not appetizing at all. And so I don't know, some of the things that I really gravitated toward on this trip, sandwiches, like pre-made deli sandwiches, things like that, which obviously don't keep for very long, but I would buy 1 or 2 of those every time I had an opportunity for like lunch that day and maybe even dinner or part of dinner that day. And they had just always tasted so good to me, so much better than like, I don't know, cheap ramen or something like that, is calories, but maybe not particularly healthful calories. Something else you can find in a lot of small stores that I'll eat a lot of is just like instant mashed potatoes and cheese and some sort of packaged fish, or if you can find smoked salmon in a grocery store or something like that. That always tastes delicious and has a fair bit of protein in it, which helps with the recovery along the way. Oh, what else?
It sounds like I'm wondering if this might be your strategy. I'm going to fill in some dots here or connect some dots, but like, and one thing I might do is like, go into a grocery store, pack some stuff that's going to perish within a day and a half or something, eat that first. And then you have like your ramen and your mashed potatoes for like when you dwindle down on your supplies.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I would, especially on days when I'd leave a town like in the late afternoon or something and not have to carry stuff very far until dinner or, and then breakfast the next day. My bike would be so heavy because I'd have like a big thing of yogurt and probably a couple apples and a thing of orange juice, like all sorts of real food.
Just anything fresh.
Yeah. Stuff that you can't carry for days on end, but hey, if you can get it and carry it for 5 hours or something and then enjoy it at camp for dinner and breakfast. I think, that's definitely something I've done a lot more of in recent years, that just the stuff that you can carry gets old really fast. And so that Yeah, I don't know. I don't have
What
any.
about what about your most raunchy meal? What was the worst
Ooh,
hodgepodge of concoction that you put together for dinner one night or for breakfast?
man, I don't know if I had any really terrible ones. There were a few times where I'd like grab pizza or something for dinner and then carry it the next day for dinner that day also.
Oh,
And
that's
a
fine.
hot day in the 90s, and you pull it out like, ooh, I think this is still good. But like, if your mind is questioning it, then your taste buds are going to kind of question it. It makes it hard to enjoy. And it never got sick from anything, but there were a few of those on those really hot days. So much
I
of the ride
trust
seemed like it was
pizza.
really hot.
I don't know
I
why. I think there's enough preservatives, but I haven't got bit yet. I've eaten some old pizza, and I'm not recommending anyone do this. But I have a tendency to trust it more than I probably should.
I guess I don't know of any pizza I've ever eaten that's made me sick. There's
I
other
haven't
things I
either.
know
Yeah.
specifically, like that was what made me sick, but
Hmm.
pizza hasn't been one of those things. So,
All right, let's talk about like bike equipment. Speaking to the US portion, you said
hmm
50% single track about, so
yeah,
very mountain bike.
yeah,
This is a mountain bike trail. This is a mountain bike
yeah.
course.
Don't like Great Divide mountain bike route. You can ride a gravel bike on that. Plenty of people have.
Yeah.
Don't even think about bringing a gravel bike for Orogenesis. It's like it's mountain bike country. You could do it on a hardtail, definitely. I rode a big chunk of Washington with a guy named Brandon Baker from up there that didn't know him ahead of time. Just he started the Washington piece of it the day before me, I guess. And I caught up to him maybe 5 days in, and then we rode the entire rest of the state together. Had a blast with him. He was on a hardtail. I was on full suspension. He was just shredding it. And at the end of it, he's like, this worked fine. If I were to do it again, I definitely would ride full suspension just to
Okay.
like, it's more fun. It's easier on the body. He was breaking more equipment because, just watch him and he's getting thrown around a lot more in the really rocky sections and bike getting thrown around more. That's just harder on stuff. And full suspension's just gentle on the body, gentle on your gear. So you can definitely ride it on any kind of mountain bike, but full suspension definitely will be more fun for most of it.
So you're talking about how rowdy this trail is in part. I mean, can we compare it to Colorado Trail or AZT in any way?
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what would you like say to kind of get people thinking in the right, category for at least
Yeah.
parts of
So,
this trail?
I mean, I would say think like San Juan Mountains of Colorado, like the western or southern, southwestern, I guess, half of the Colorado Trail. From kind of Durango all the way to through Sargent's Mesa, that really rugged middle bit of the trail. It's kind of similar to that, like huge climbs, lots of 4,000-foot climbs in Washington, lots of huge single track descents, lots of really rocky riding, but a lot of trail that's less traveled than the Colorado Trail up there.
Hmm.
So like, the Colorado Trail is hard, but it's well trafficked at this point. So there's like obvious tread, it's packed down. There's a lot of loose rocks in places, but there's a lot of embedded rocks and like just a lot of traction overall is pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas, the moto trails in Washington, not as heavily traveled. It's a whole different style of riding. So I think some of that's just, it's even more technical. A lot of steep stuff where you're just guaranteed to be pushing up because of how loose it is. A lot of Colorado Trail, the steep stuff you push up is usually just because it's either at really high altitude and there's no oxygen, or it's just really steep.
Hmm.
But moto trails have so much that it might not be unridably steep, but it's unridably loose going up it and maybe even coming down the other side.
Yeah. And that's just because, I don't live in an area where motos are everywhere, but my assumption is that they're just tearing up the trail. So
Yeah,
they're
it
like,
just
it's
gets
just loose. Yeah.
churned up, rutted out a little bit more. But the upside to moto trails is that they can't get over a lot of deadfall with their motos. And so most moto areas have communities that have some really good trail stewards in them and go out on moto with chainsaws and clear the trails. And
Mm.
so, Continental Divide Trail, when I rode that, oh God, I probably have to my bike over thousands of downed trees, like literally thousands of them.
Yeah.
And Washington, I think there were maybe 15.
Okay.
Like you could almost count them on two hands. There were so
Wow.
few. And so it's a totally different riding experience when you can just ride steadily and not have to be getting off every 2 minutes or 5 minutes to clamber over deadfall. So that aspect is really nice of the moto trails. And if you know moto trail riding, there's some people that just relish that kind of like raw single track style, and I really do like that kind of stuff even on a loaded bike. So I enjoyed that a lot. Farther south, California was way different from Washington. Whole mix, all different styles of trail, but the whole Tahoe region, there's so much really good single track that's well maintained, lots of traffic on it, like not necessarily easy trail, but like well maintained trail, which is just it feels like a much easier experience than raw backcountry overgrown stuff. And then farther south in California, there was a lot more of that. So that back to kind of Colorado Trail kind of style demand for those. There wasn't as much like raw desert single track like the Arizona Trail has.
Okay.
Southern California definitely had some stuff that felt more like that. And then there was some just like steep, rowdy single track south of the Sierra, just all moto trail. Like there was one section through the Paiute Mountains that I think it was 100 miles with 20,000 feet of climbing. It was a ridiculous amount of climbing for that distance. And I think I pushed my bike up half of it. Like definitely that little, it was like a 2.5 day stretch. And I think that might have been the crux of California. Just that one, like up and over this one mountain range, but it was hard and dry. And, something that you can't even, I guess if you know the Colorado Trail, like imagine the 10-mile range outside of Breckenridge.
I haven't ridden that one, but other people will have, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably the single hardest climb on the entire route if you're going in the Durango or Denver to Durango direction. And or imagine on the Arizona Trail pushing your bike up Mount Lemmon, like kind of that style of riding. Like there's not a lot of that on Orogenesis, but there's a few things out there that are. And the Paiute Mountains in Southern California were one of those.
And what about the other 50%? What are you mostly on?
Mix of everything. The goal is as much dirt as possible.
Sure.
And so the route had so little pavement along the way. It was kind of shocking how little pavement there was. And a lot of dirt road. Sections had a lot of Jeep road riding, but I would say more of it was along the lines of like occasionally maintained or well-maintained dirt road than like raw, hard Jeep road. There were definitely places especially in the southern half of California that were more rugged, kind of rough, rutted out Jeep road. Kind of that technical 4x4 road riding sort of thing that, you've got plenty of line options. It can be harder than single track, but you've got lots of options and it's 10 feet wide instead of a foot wide. So definitely still very demanding, challenging riding. And that kind of carried all the way into Baja. Like Baja has so much really challenging technical Jeep road, old blown out road stuff that Baja 1000 race course uses and completely destroys. Baja is not a nice dirt road cruise like the Great Divide mountain bike route by any means.
Yeah, I want to actually dive into Baja in a little bit because that's a area that I'm very interested to ride in.
Yeah.
But in the United States, what were some of your highlights? Did you had to have favorite sections?
I think
it's hard to break up like 3,200 miles of trail, but what are some of your highlights that really stood out to you?
So I think Washington, the entirety of Washington pretty much was a highlight. And so that's a big chunk. Like that's a 3-week ride if you want to go do that. And it was hard, but it was, like I said earlier, it was one of those kinds of hard that is always rewarding you for the amount of effort that you put into it. And some of those rewards were big, like the scenery, the landscape, the massive descents, like how good some of those trails were. Just all different things along the way, the little communities. And there were so many folks I ran into along the way that were stoked that people were out on the route now that it's like become, they've heard about the route being developed and now there's actually people riding it. And like, cool, this is going to be awesome. I'm really happy that this comes through my town or my trail system or whatever it is. So Washington was phenomenal.
Usually people don't mind hard things if there's a big payoff, right?
Exactly.
It's whenever it's hard for no payoff, you're like, what the fuck am I doing? But like when there's always payoff, you're like, okay, I'm here.
Totally. And I think that kind of is reflected in probably my second favorite section of the whole route, which was also really hard. It was the stretch above Los Angeles in the San Gabriel Mountains in the Angeles National Forest. I'd never ridden there before, but that was one area. I'd heard about how good the trails were, how good the riding was, and then heard about the all the work the Lowlifes trail crew has been putting into resurrecting some of those trails after wildfires in recent years. The Radivis has had a few really good articles, like in-depth articles about what that trail org has been putting into resurrecting those trails, and those folks are really excited that Orogenesis is coming through there and using some of those trails that they've been resurrecting. And so that was another one on paper. I was looking at it, I was like, oh man, this is going to be maybe the crux of California, because it's like 130 miles or so, and I think 32,000 feet of climbing, 34,000 feet of climbing, something like that. And so, you see that and like, okay, I think maybe this might take 4 days to get through. And like, oh, there's nowhere to resupply in there either. Okay, so I'm going to have to leave and start that section with 4 days of food. Okay, this is going to be hard. And so that stretch, my friend Hugh Oliver came over from, he lives in the Scottish Highlands. And if you know the Pictish Trail, he was one of the creators of that bikepacking route there. And he is kind of the caretaker of the Cairngorms Loop in that area. So he's very into the bikepacking world there. And I've ridden with him in Alaska in the winter. But he came over and joined me for a couple weeks in Southern California, just based on when he could get over here with his work schedule. And so he met me at the beginning of that 4-day stretch. And I was like, all right, Hugh, this is going to be hard. I think it's going to be good, but it's definitely going to be hard. And he was like, cool.
Here's your warm up.
I believe you. I trust that this will be great. And it was so good. Like, it was hard, but the trails were mostly pretty well maintained, hard, like steep up, steep down, very exposed. Like that range, just all the slopes are really steep. And so bench cut trail, if you fall off the downhill side of it, like you fall far, even if it's not a cliff. And then there's a lot of sections that are actually cliffs. Like you're on a little 18-inch wide bench cut into the sandstone, and there's a cliff on like no fall zone on the left side. And so Hugh and I started, it was a bit of a debacle with TSA losing one of his pedals on the flight over there out of his bike case. And so amazingly, the ED of the Lowlifes came out with a brand new pair of pedals for Hugh so that we could actually get rolling. But we had a later start that day, so we basically hit the beginning of this big descent down the Condor Trail, which is this, I think it's a 5,000 foot descent down from high in the mountains, kind of toward the edge of LA. And the Lowlifes had just finished resurrecting that trail. And we hit it like at dusk. So we ended up riding most of it in the dark. And you can just like look off with your helmet light off to the side. Like, wow, it is just blackness down to my left. And so we didn't even realize how sketchy some of that, like it's a good trail, but if, your handlebar catches on the rock face or something like that, like you could get into trouble pretty fast.
It's one of those situations where sometimes I'll think to myself, like, holy crap, they let people do this?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Like the Forest Service is okay with people riding this trail? Cool,
I just think they don't know, which is great. By the way, I am for people being able to make those decisions for themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, totally. I'm always get stoked whenever it's like, oh, they let us do this. And let us humans make decisions for ourselves. But then you got idiots that go out there and jump off cliffs. So you never know. But
it's hard to manage that. But so that was the first day. And then every day through that section was very different from the previous one. And all good trails, all really cool scenery, really remote riding, despite being like, a ridge line away from 18 million people in LA. We hardly saw anyone on the trails. But that 4-day stretch ends in the little mountain town of Wrightwood, and super good sections. So that would be another highlight, even though it was one of the hardest sections. It was like we were saying, like it rewards you in a big way for putting in that effort.
Right.
And then I think my other favorite section was some of what Chris Mack has been working on in what he calls the Sierra Camino section of it. He lives in South Lake on the south side of Lake Tahoe, and pretty much starting from like Downeyville or just north of Downeyville in the Lost Sierra, the route is mostly single track from there all the way down past Lake Tahoe and a little bit farther south to the tiny mountain town of Markleyville. And so that's like a week of mostly single track all the way through there, and a lot of good trail, very scenic.
I've heard there's some really good riding in that area. Yeah.
And so that's one that, I would say it's not overly hard riding like Washington is, or like the Angeles National Forest is. It's, more moderate level difficulty and a lot of trail that gets well ridden. And so it's just, good conditions for bike packing on those trails. So that's another highlight, I think, would be that. So those are probably the three top ones. Another one would definitely be Southern Oregon, the Fremont National Recreation Trail, but it's just so much deadfall on it right now from fires, and the Oregon Timber Trail Association doesn't have the person power or the volunteer base to keep up with clearing all that, because they had it all cleared like 4 years ago, and so much has fallen in the time since then. So that's one that, if you're a Sawyer and want to help out Sawyers, there's a couple trail work weekends down on that section of trail that were just announced for this season. So if you can get out there and help, that trail desperately. Yep, needs a lot of that. Yeah. What's that?
I said just get your chainsaw out.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about Baja Divide a little bit. I think you mentioned that you had never ridden it either. So this was your first time to ride it?
I'd ridden the Cape Loop a couple winters ago, a very last minute trip with some friends, went down and just did a quick loop in 4 days down there. And that was all I had seen of Baja.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me get my questions. that was one thing. That was one thought I had whenever I was preparing for this interview is like, we didn't cover it in this episode, but you're a geologist by trade, not a genealogist.
I know nothing about genealogy.
A PhD in geology. I'll get it right. Yes. There's too many of those. And so I was just thinking that for you, it had to be really neat to, start all the way up in Washington, up in the mountains, and come all the way down to, a desert beach right along the Baja Divide. I'm just like putting myself in your shoes a little bit, but I have to imagine that was one of the cool experiences for you, is just watching the geology change over the course of the almost 4,000 miles or whatever.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think there's also, I have a PhD in it, but I can still get in a place I've never been before and be absolutely clueless about what's going on geologically. And so some of the time it's awesome to be able to have that vision to look out across the landscape and kind of piece together things of what's happened in the history of that area, how it came to look like it does as a landscape. And then there's other places you get to, it's like, wow, I have no clue this makes no sense to me. And so, then if I'd get cell service, I'd usually like dig in online, try to find some geologic reports or something like that from the USGS for a particular area to make a little bit more sense of what I saw. So there's a lot of learning along the way that goes into understanding places like that. But it was really cool, especially to get down to the southern half of California, where I know a lot more about the geology and, see how everything farther north trends into that. And then knowing, home base for me is Arizona. And so being able to tie what I was seeing in Southern California in with what I know from a little bit farther east in the continent, that was great. And then getting into Baja was kind of getting back into very unfamiliar territory, geologically speaking, and, more just being able to look around, try to figure out what was going on, and then realizing I can't even find any resources in English to learn more about it when I'm on the trail. So I have a lot that I still want to learn about that piece of the ride.
To learn Spanish, and then
yes,
or I guess you could just get ChatGPT to translate it for you.
We live in, but I'd rather not.
Fair enough. I was just reading right before this how much water we don't have right now.
Yeah.
So what is the riding like in Baja? We've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but to have this be a standalone issue or standalone episode, you mentioned earlier the riding is completely different. So how would you summarize the riding in Baja?
Yeah, so it was really fun, and I was also a little surprised just how it felt completely like as I reached the Mexican border and crossed over it. It was like one adventure ended, and it was a completely different one starting with the Baja Divide. And like I mentioned earlier, you're in a different country, the culture changes, the language changes, the landscape also changed very quickly and looked very different from what Southern California had looked like. The riding style, moving away from the trail focus, was really different. And then Claire joined me for that. So I had a riding partner for the entirety of Baja and had her along, which was awesome. And then I switched bikes too. And so I was on a, instead of full suspension,
I was wondering if you did. Okay.
Yeah, I was on a drop bar hardtail.
Nice.
for Baja, and part of that was just for having more carrying capacity for gear and for especially water, since that route is really really dry. Um, and so like everything felt different, and it felt like, okay, I'm done with the U.S. part of Orogenesis. That was the big unknown. Like Baja Divide is well established at this point.
Right.
There's lots of people that ride it, so it's easy to figure out information about it, and pretty well known where you can stay, where you can get food, water along the way, that sort of stuff. Um, but despite all the resources out there, I think most people that go down and ride it kind of get epicked by how demanding the riding is, and are pretty surprised early on. Because I think the northern half of the route definitely has most of the hardest riding. Um,
Okay.
and it's not necessarily the terrain, like there's not a ton of climbing on the route. There's also not a lot of flat riding. There's a lot of just like rolling or short, steep ups and downs. And there's a lot of roads that are just blown out from age, from erosion, from race trucks on them, things like that. And so you'll get some sections of really nice, well-trafficked dirt roads, um, and then get onto stuff that was, blown out by flash flooding last year and hasn't been repaired and might not be repaired for a few years. And then it's super rutted out from these race trucks going on it. And it's harder than a lot of single track might be, even though it's 10 feet wide. And so a lot of hike-a-bike in places, a lot of kind of sandy or moon dust type stuff in places, a lot of hike-a-bike. Never for that long usually, but we had one day that we covered 25 miles, I think, and a lot of hiking, a lot of loose stuff. And it was hot, and so we had heavy bikes with water, which then slows you down even more because you've got all that weight. So it's there's a big mix in what the riding is like, but it definitely, especially in the northern half, has a lot of really demanding riding in it. Like if you've ridden the Great Divide mountain bike route, think about northern New Mexico, which I think for a lot of people, or maybe New Mexico in general, like the hardest riding in the whole route is in New Mexico, and kind of concentrate some of those harder sections. That's what the northern half of the Baja Divide feels like. And then things mellow out a little bit as you get farther south. And so our daily mileage went up by like 10 miles a day when we got into the second half. And it was a lot more good dirt road down there, less sand, and less really rugged Jeep road along the way. So, it's definitely hard touring. And it's soft enough that I think having 2.6 inch or 2.8 inch tires is really advantageous. Some people are like, man, I'd never ride it without a fat bike.
Yeah.
There's no need for that. Like,
Okay.
it's there's a lot of fear mongering around. I don't think it's intentional, but people just focus on like, ooh, what's the hardest element of this? How can I be most prepared for that? And for a
Right.
lot of people, that's the sandiness of it or the softness of it. And the reality is that's probably like 6% of the route by mileage or something like that.
It takes up 60% of your brain space, but it's only 60%
Yes,
of the route. Yeah.
yeah. And so why ride a fat bike for that small amount of the route when most of it's like very manageable on 2.4 inch tires or something like that. So we were on 2.8s, and that was absolutely fine. We could have gotten away with
Good.
2.6s, but
Yeah.
it definitely depends a little bit on how heavily your bike is loaded, how much you weigh as a rider. Some people have very, very heavily loaded bikes, and so wider tires are definitely going to be more supportive for those folks.
About how, like, for an average bike packer, how many miles per day do you think is realistic for this is mostly a touring route, right? So for a touring pace, like, what do you think is like a good rough estimate of like daily mileage?
Yeah. So, man, it was really fun we ran into a lot of other riders down there, like probably, I don't know, 15, 18, something like that, that we either talked to or spent a few days at a time riding with. And I think on average, most people that we encountered were doing something like 40 miles per day, maybe 45 per day. So not huge days. Like if you were to go do that same thing and talk to a bunch of people on the Great Divide mountain bike route, they'd probably be doing like 60-mile days or 65 on average, something like that. So considerably slower and more demanding in Baja. And my partner, Claire, this was her first bikepacking trip longer than 4 days. So big jump from anything that she had ever done. And
Wow.
she, she's strong. She runs a lot, rides a lot, but definitely is more of a runner than a cyclist, and hasn't spent a ton of time on heavily loaded bikes, and isn't a mountain biker. She loves gravel riding. And so throw her
Yeah.
on a loaded bike and onto this technical riding.
Kudos to her.
Definitely was. Oh, she crushed it. It was, and the first half was hard. Like she was like, "Is this really what I want? Like this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Is this actually fun? I don't know if this is,
Yeah.
And it improved as she got better at that riding, got stronger, and the route evolved as we got farther south. But that's where she is as a rider and doing that sort of thing. And so 45-mile days for us, were pretty much all day pedaling from an hour after sunrise or something until dusk. And we were there in November, December, where the days are short. So that was riding from like 8 a.m. to like 4:30, 5 p.m. or something like that, with some stops along the way, not riding nonstop. But trying to just focus on forward progress. So I think a lot of people really overestimate how many miles a day they can cover for Baja.
I would think so.
And then you also look like Marone Golfman raced it a few years ago and set an FKT on it of like
that's right.
10 days or something ridiculous like that. Like you look at that like, oh, cool. I should be able to do, maybe half that distance in a day or a third of that. But it's a whole different realm. Like we were doing a quarter of what he was doing in a day. So
why ride the Baja Divide? You didn't have to. That wasn't part of the, I think most people know the origin. Oh, wait, don't tell me.
You got it.
I got the other I fucked it up. I got the other one, Orogenesis, stuck in my head. Orogenesis.
Yes.
I got that other one stuck in my head and it won't go out. But yeah, like, so that wasn't technically part of your scouting, or maybe it was.
Well, it wasn't part of the kind of ground truth thing I was doing, but it is technically part of the route. And so I did want to ride the whole thing. And the wanting to ride Baja was part of what drew me to maybe I should just do the whole thing this year. It was like I wanted to experience that whole traverse in one ride. And I'd also thought a little bit about the seasonality, like I didn't know if starting in the fall up north would put me in Baja too early, like if it'd still be hot down there. If you wanted to ride northbound, there's just no good seasonality or no good time of year for that because of snow in the Sierra and when it's hot in Baja. And so part of me thought about like, oh, should I do it in kind of pieces, like ride Baja in the winter and then come back and ride the rest of the route in, a couple months after that. But I wanted that kind of linear, continuous traverse, I decided. So doing it in the kind of starting late summer up north and then racing winter down through the Sierra seemed like the way to do it. So I really wanted the full experience of all of that, since it is part of the route and it is such a long, continuous route, kind of traverse of many landscapes. And there was another guy, Jacob Ashton, he had already ridden Baja Divide, but he rode the whole US part of Orogenesis. He was just like 2 to 3 weeks behind me, I think, pretty much the whole time down. And so there were two of us out there. We never saw each other. I still haven't met him in person. But he rode the whole US part of it. So two people actually rode the full length of it this past year. And so it's, he wasn't doing any kind of ground truthing work or anything, but it sounded like he had an awesome hard adventure out there as well, on the US part of it. And I think in a way it seemed like he was maybe a little disappointed that he wasn't continuing on to do Baja, but since he had already seen it, there wasn't that incentive to
the motivation wasn't quite there
as part of that. Yeah.
All right. So you're back home and now you have homework. I assume you have to take all the information and your route notes. But I mean, give us an idea of like what's next for the project. What's needed? What are you guys working on right now?
Yeah. Well, I actually need to talk to Gabe about that because I haven't talked to him in person since I finished the ride. It's been
Gabe, listen to the podcast. We'll catch you up to speed.
yeah, exactly. And so I don't know exactly what their plan is, but I think everyone was kind of shocked when I was like, the route's almost ready to go. Like it's like 99% there. Okay. I think everyone was surprised to hear that. I think in part because some of them have been so immersed in this and they're thinking about like the gaps, like the pieces of single track that are missing in the route where, there's longer dirt road sections or something like that. They're already thinking like years down the road for how we're going to get, and I shouldn't say how they're going to get those sections of trail approved and built, that I think they're just like bigger picture, longer term thinking at this point and didn't even realize that things are so close to being ready. So I know the plan this past year was to release 2 or 3 sections of the route that are ready to go. And I think only one of them got officially released, that one in
I
Southern
think so.
Washington this past year. So I think there's a lot of work to do getting just kind of the route resources together for everyone, like all the stuff we were talking about that goes into the planning pieces of it and narratives for what each piece is like. But I mean, the route is not far from being ready to release the whole US part of it to the public. So I'm hoping that we can all rally and make that come together sooner than later. But like I said, I'm not officially involved in the Orogenesis organization, and so I think we just need to figure out when I'm going to have time to compile everything, and then what the steps are to, get all that into Ride with GPS and get the routes ready to release.
So the route that you rode, I mean, I know you had to take a couple fire detours, et cetera. And it sounds like they have in their mind, based on what you said, like, this grand vision for more single track connectors. But if I understand what you're saying, like, you could release something similar to what you did, in the near future, and then in the more long term future, you would add in these extra single tracks that are like getting built, but there's something in place now that is almost rideable.
I mean, it basically is rideable with just a few little corrections here and there for things that didn't quite work out on the ground when I went through. So yeah, it's super close. It's gonna, like I said, it'll evolve for years to come as more trail is built. There's some places where there's trail on the ground already that just needs a lot of work to basically open back up to make passable before it can be included in the route. And then Evan Solberger in Southern California, who's put in a ton of volunteer work doing scouting for this. He's got visions for a bunch of smaller loop options off the main spine of Orogenesis along the way. So I think he's going to start trying to get some of those out next year, or no, later this year, 2026. So there should be a lot coming fairly soon. And man, I've had so many people reach out. They're like, "Hey, can you share your track from this piece or from that piece? I want to go ride it this summer when the snow melts off." Which there's not much snow anywhere right now, so than folks expect. But yeah.
Well, let's speak to that, because that was actually going to be my next question. After listening to this podcast, and I mean, you were out there a while. I'm sure a lot of people were following your journey and interested to maybe follow in your footsteps. What would be your recommendations for people who are kind of chomping at the bit to get out there? Would you say, "Hey, hold up, let's wait till we get, a more vetted route," or, your track leaders is out on the internet, someone could follow your tracks? Like, what would you say to people who are thinking about maybe taking this on?
Yeah, people definitely can. I would say wait a few months to see what the vision, what the plan is for getting stuff out this summer, for this next riding season is. Southern Washington, that piece is already released and is awesome. And so that's one that folks can already ride. And if you do want the whole route, you can reach out to the Orogenesis Collective, and Gabe will send you the kind of the beta version, basically what I rode more or less. And it's not quite fully refined, obviously, yet, but you can go ride it on your own. It's not like it's being kept secret or anything. It's just not quite finalized. Yeah. And so
well, I mean, you've been only home for 30 days, so we'll give you a little bit of time. It's okay.
Yeah. So
tell us about, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you are thinking about it, definitely plan on getting out there, and you don't need to ride the whole thing. Like I would always encourage people, go ride a chunk of a big route like this, do a week or something, see what it's like, see what you're getting yourself into, and that'll make it easier to plan for a successful trip for a much bigger piece, if that's what your ultimate goal is.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I mean, and maybe you know this information, maybe you don't, but as far as like the future hopes and dreams for this trail network, do you think they see it as being similar to like a PCT, where people could do like sections, people could do the whole thing, you could tour it, you could set an FKT, like it's just there. And that definitely is their vision. The reality is very few people have either the time off work, the resources, the desire, or all of those to do, a 3-month trip or a 4.5-month trip. But a lot of people go to a 1 week or 2 week or a 3 week trip potentially. And so even if you look at long trails like the PCT or the CDT, there's so many people that are section hiking pieces of it. And they may or may not have plans to do all of it over the years, do all of it in sections. But there's lots of people out there for short trips.
way more than there are doing the whole thing in a one go.
Yeah.
So that's just the reality of who users are going to generally be for long trails like this. And same goes for like the Arizona Trail. There's way more people that do day rides or 2 or 3 day trips on it than do the whole thing.
It's interesting. We don't really have, I mean, we have like the Tour Divide, but still with the Tour Divide, people tend to want to do it in one go. But because bikes can cover so much more terrain, we haven't had too many of these routes being developed where I think it might lend itself more to people doing sections at a time. They might break it up into 3 different parts or 4 different parts and ride it, over the course of a couple seasons or something, or 3 or 4 seasons, which is interesting. I don't think we have many of those trails out there because most people, again, can just cover so much ground that it's not necessary.
Yeah, and so many of these long routes are dirt road routes, which lend themselves to being able to ride relatively quickly on them. Whereas single track routes like this, like, man, 3 months. I mean, some people at different paces would take 4 months to do the US part of Orogenesis potentially. So, and that, then you start getting into the reality that maybe there isn't an actual good season to be out there for 4 months just because of, when it's super hot in one place down low and when it's snowy in others. And so for folks that are looking at slower paces, like, section riding probably is a better way to do it. It'll make it a more enjoyable experience along the way.
That just made me think of a question. Based on your experience, what do you think could be a fast time for the whole thing?
I was thinking about that. Because I think I said I probably had 3.5 weeks or something of days off along the way when I was out there. And so if you just get rid of those and just if you were to ride focused and continuously all day and sleep all night, man, I think you could do it in probably, I don't know, 60 days probably. Would be a pretty fast time.
Yeah. So it's a commitment.
Yeah, there was a guy that rode the Continental Divide Trail this year. He was the 5th one ever to bike the full length of the bike legal version of it. And I think he rode probably the most efficient version of it, kind of taking the best pieces of some of the single track bypasses around Wilderness. And then I chatted with him before he left. It was like, don't even try to ride this part. There's literally no trail on the ground. Like, skip this, take that. And so he rode, I think, a really efficient version, but he did it in like 66 days or something. I think he rode it like 20 days faster than I was, than I went on it. And, I wasn't focused on speed, but he also was just trying to be efficient and, ride all day, sleep all night kind of thing. And that was faster than I had ever contemplated riding that route. So, I bet
maybe fast
probably do 50 some on Orogenesis, and not even in like race mode, just in like very dedicated fast tour mode for a, relatively strong rider.
Oh man, that's wild to think about being in race mode for that long. But I mean, Lael's about to go for around the world again, and that stuff, like being in race mode for that many days on end, just seems really challenging.
Yeah, my mind could not do that at this point. It does not have the desire to have that kind of experience. But man, I'm impressed by people that can.
Any other thoughts on Orogenesis? I want to shift gears to a couple other topics before I let you go, but any closing thoughts on, I got the name right. At the end of the podcast, I got it. Orogenesis.
Yep.
It only took 1 episode.
Oh man, I don't know. I think I'm really excited to see folks out there on it. I think the route really hits the sweet spot between by incorporating a lot of good backcountry trail, which usually is harder riding, but not being over the top hard. And then, like I mentioned earlier, having pretty reasonably spaced resupply options along the way. So I think as far as a really long single track focused route, it's probably going to end up being one of the more accessible ones out there. And there aren't that many. There's AZT, CDT, kind of those scales in the US at this point. So I'm really excited to see people out there. And there's been so many bikepacking routes developed over the years, and I've been part of a lot of big projects like that, and I've never seen one that has had so much enthusiasm on the ground, like in towns along the way, people knowing that it's a thing, local riders coming out to say hi to people. Like, I've never experienced that, and that just all the way down the US part of the ride. That kind of thing was happening again and again. So there's a lot of folks that are really excited for it along the way. And so I think that's just going to help really continue to build the momentum for the route. And it's, you know, it's been 8 years in development now. And as soon as more people are out riding it, then it's like, it's poised to be a thing rather than a concept. And so I think that's...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say having those routes and people bought into the idea, or sorry, not the routes, the towns along the route, and the communities bought in, and it's hard to overemphasize like how important that is to the success of a route long term. To have, because not everybody's going to get the vision in my experience immediately, right? It takes a little, some people, it takes a little bit of time to like warm up the engine to like what's happening and the benefit to having, you know, a recreational trail like this in your backyard that comes through your town. Not everybody gets it immediately. So to have such a warm, welcoming along the route, actually really encouraging.
Yeah. And the other piece that was related to that is that there's already the PCT through this whole corridor. And people in towns, like everybody knows about the PCT. And then they're like, oh, you're right. There's like a mountain bike PCT. And it's like, yeah, there's going to be, like, that's what I'm riding. Like, whoa.
That helps. Yeah.
It's about time. Like, so people, people like they can link together those two different things. Like, oh, you're doing something like the hikers do, but on a bike. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, that was really fun to experience.
Yeah, that's
out there.
And then
the hikers I ran into, the PCT hikers that I ran into along the way, kind of like on the CDT, they were all so excited. Like, oh wow, a mountain bike version? That's cool. I want to do that.
Yeah.
So hikers will be out riding Orogenesis soon too.
Yeah. There's been plenty of through hikers that have come from through hiking to bike packing. And so, it's an easy leap, at least from an adventure standpoint. All right. Well, let's touch on bikepacking routes real quick. What is your? I haven't seen anything change, but what is your current role with bikepacking routes?
I don't have an official role at this point. I've been a little bit less involved. Well, pretty much uninvolved since early last year because Orogenesis kind of took over, and I was so overwhelmed with the prep for that, and so. Bikepacking routes is just off and flourishing without my involvement, which is awesome to see because my goal was never to be the ED of this forever, running it forever. Like I really, didn't necessarily even want that role, just wanted the organization to succeed. And so we've got Noelle Battle in the ED role at this point and just crushing. She's accomplished so much in her time there, gotten so many new programs off the ground. The community routes community route program is, I'm seeing new routes in there being submitted and released every few weeks, which is amazing because those are all stewarded routes that have local people that are making sure that they're up to date and the resources are detailed and, not setting people up to get epicked along the way. So that's really cool. And Noelle and Kate Boyle were in Washington, D.C. With Outdoor Alliance and doing advocacy work, meeting with lawmakers. When was that? In October, I guess, when I was out on the trail. And so it's amazing to know that this little tiny organization we founded, 8 years ago now, I guess.
Wow. Has it been 8 years?
It's been 8 years. Yeah. And
so Bikes for Death started 8 years ago too. So we were,
It was exactly. Yeah. It was right around the same
timing. Okay.
But yeah, now there's a seat at the table with other big advocacy organizations and public lands groups and meeting with lawmakers and moving things forward in that sense. And, the big Bolt Act collaboration with IMBA and People for Bikes. And that, I can't believe how far the organization has come in that time. And I'm so grateful for everyone that's involved and has, just taken it from where I was when I stepped out of the ED role and just kept running. Maybe even ran faster, I think, moving forward. So now Kate Boyle is just stepping into a dedicated advocacy role there, which is the first dedicated advocacy person there'll have been at the organization in its history, which is amazing. So.
You have a visitor?
Claire's here.
Hey, Claire. How are you doing?
Hi.
Welcome to the Bikes for Death podcast. Tell us all about your Tour Divide or your Baja Divide.
Baja Divide. Yep.
I wanted to say nice things about Noel Battle. I have you stepped down and Noel stepped in, and I've got a chance to work a lot with Noel. She and I both worked together with the Ride Your Damn Bike Festival that we did in Fayetteville, Arkansas last year, and we rode one of y'all's route projects there at Devil's Den, that Bikepacking Routes.
Oh, that was the one you did. Oh, cool.
Yeah, we did Devil's Den. And yeah, I know you did that one because I used some of your photography in our promo and stuff like that. But yeah, Noelle's been doing a great job. She's really seems to be like on top of it, and it seems from like the outsider's perspective, there's a lot of momentum, and she's really carried the torch well. And I said this to you the first time we talked about Bikepacking Routes. Is I think you said I'm surprised at how quickly it's taking off, and I think that speaks to how much it was needed, right? How much that role, how much we needed that representation. And so my guess is that that's part of its success. Part of it is y'all doing a great job and putting together a good mission plan, a good team, all that, good community surrounding it. But it was also really needed. We need, what did I say in our first podcast? Like, we need adults at the table. We're out there just playing bikes and playing in dirt.
That was exactly what you said.
Yeah, we need some adults in charge of this thing. So it's good to know we have adults manning the ship somewhere.
Yeah, and it's been really, when Noelle stepped in, she definitely kind of changed the focus of certain things based on where she thought the organization should be going and where the kind of ever evolving board of directors did. And so there's been a much bigger focus on the community side of things. And I think Noelle's also been able to bring so much more of the East Coast community into it, because prior to her, everyone involved was living out in the kind of western half of the country, pretty much aside from a few board members. And so that's really helped tremendously to just literally engage people out the eastern half of the country, and all the events that are on the ground now happening that are bringing people together, like the Ride Your Damn Bike Festival. That you can't build community through a website or through a national organization that doesn't actually have engagement on the ground at different places. And so that was one of the big things that Noelle saw was very much needed, and we were basically poised to start rolling out more of that, and had even had program visions all outlined, and like, this is what it's going to be. And I was always a little reluctant, since we didn't have the funding or the resources necessarily to roll those out. And Noelle looked at it like, this is ready to go? Oh, well, let's just get it out there. We'll figure out the rest later.
Yeah.
That's her approach, and it's worked so well.
That's my approach too. Put something on the calendar, commit yourself to it, and you figure out, how to get there along the way.
Yep.
All right. Last question is a selfish one, but maybe other people can benefit from it as well. I guess I should preface this by saying you do ultra cycling coaching. You also have a training plan that you can buy on your website. So are you open to giving some training advice free?
Oh, of course. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So this is just another fun one, but I'm training for Doom. I'm doing the High Watch. It's March 13th, so a little bit less than 2 months away. I'm doing the 205-mile version. Due to my own business and creating routes and the Texas Showdown Series, 2025 was one of the least I've ridden my bikes. I rode a total of like 1,500 miles in 2025. That is
a little lower than usual for you.
That's a little low. I've been supplementing with gym work and running and some tennis and stuff. So I'm not coming at a zero fitness, but I guess to preface this just a little bit further, I was, total training time, I was around 4 hours a week. I'm up to over 7, and I'm building that. I'm essentially taking my gym, my running, cycling, prioritizing mountain biking, as many mountain bike miles as I can for training. And just right now I'm just focusing on building a solid base. But what is your 60 to 90 second or longer, whatever, but what is your tips for, it's not just me, but I think there's a lot of people that are coming off like winter break. Maybe they're training for East Texas Showdown. Maybe they're training for Doom.
Like me coming off
like all of
a
us.
month of not doing a lot after finishing a massive thing, and can feel that my fitness is definitely not where it usually is. And like I didn't, had zero intensity for 4.5 months. And so I have like zero top end right now.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so many people are in, similar situation, especially at this time of year. And so I think one thing I'd say, good job with the focus on like trying to build that base. Like you can't rush that, especially for ultras. Like you don't want to skip building a solid base, because the reality is when you're racing an ultra, most of the time you're going at a very low intensity just for a long time. And it's so much easier to create injuries if you are trying to push for a long effort and don't have that solid base in there. I know some people tend to want to, skimp on that base to be able to ride harder and do things that feel more like training than just low intensity volume and do harder rides. But you can't adequately prepare for an ultra by like low volume, high intensity type training without having that solid base in there. Okay. So good job on that. Good job mixing in cross training. That also is so helpful for minimizing the likelihood of overuse injuries or things like that along the way. I think, from the kind of time crunch perspective of like, what can you do to get some of the biggest bang for the buck as you get closer in the, the next 2 months toward that event. I would say one thing is actually back off how much mountain biking you're doing and do like 1 day of more steady pedaling.
Okay.
Mountain bikers hate to hear it, but road riding is usually better training than mountain biking when you're thinking just from a purely training perspective. You can't ignore the technical nature of riding and, being comfortable on that sort of riding and being efficient with it. So definitely don't leave out mountain biking entirely. Don't train for a mountain bike ultra on the road. But yeah, doing, if you can start doing a couple back-to-back days, like on weekends, one of those on the road, one or like gravel and one on trail, I think that would be a really good balance and keeps the fun in there for people that really do want to be mountain biking regularly.
So the road or gravel, that would be like you're looking for, saddle time, zone 2. What are you trying to accomplish in that?
When you're in that kind of base building period, definitely the steady pedaling is one of the goals. You just don't get that with mountain biking. And so if you were to go out for like a 4-hour mountain bike ride, you might only be pedaling for 3 of those 4 hours, even if you're moving for all 4 of them. Whereas road riding, you're pedaling, especially in flatter places, almost the entirety of the time. And so you get more training value in there for the duration that you're out outside of the bike. And then it's also easier to control efforts when you're on the road compared to riding trail. And so something else in the base building period that I think is really important, and this is more kind of the second half of the base building period, is starting to work in some moderate intensity. So kind of zone 3 to lower zone 4, tempo to sweet spot, if you know that terminology, working in more of that. So these are kind of like longer, moderate intensity efforts along the way. So not super hard at all. But where you're pedaling continuously for, 15, 20, 30 minutes at a little bit higher intensity than you would be in just a normal zone 2 ride. And then on the trail, I think it's, especially once your base gets a little bit stronger, using that as just a place for just natural, harder efforts along the way. Like, oh, you need to put in a hard 2-minute effort to get up this steep little climb. Cool, do it. Like, don't worry about
kind of like built-in intervals, at least in Texas, because it's just straight up and straight down. So like you're getting your interval training in while you're mountain biking here.
Yeah. So make use of that, have fun with it. And then, the nature of those back-to-back days, like that means the second day you're training on slightly more fatigued legs. That's great for increasing the training stimulus a little bit. And when you're kind of time crunched, trying to get ready for something longer, that's the best way to do it, is kind of stack days back to back or back to back to back if you can. And so, if you only can ride, say, 3 or 4 days a week, then doing a couple days like that back to back on the weekend, maybe 1 day midweek. If you can spread them out a little bit for consistency, that's better than, doing 3 days in a row and then taking 4 or 5 days off and then doing another. So, yeah,
so maybe one during the week and then 2 on the weekend, but getting the value of like stressing your body, not over stressing, but introducing, hey, you're riding and like allowing your body to kind of get on that program and build on that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think about, because my idea is I was going to start doing longer gravel rides on my mountain bike.
Huh? Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, and that's another just a reality of if you're going to be doing long races on a particular bike, spending a decent chunk of your training on that bike is definitely going to be better. If you were training for race that you're going to do on a mountain bike entirely on your gravel bike, your position's different, the muscle recruitment's a little bit different. You could have huge fitness on a gravel bike and get on a mountain bike that you hadn't ridden in months, and your muscles would fatigue in some kind of strange ways
Yeah.
on that first day of a race. And so mixing it up with some of the time on the bike you're going to race on is really valuable. It also is another way to minimize injury, just having your body accustomed to that position of that bike. But I think there's a lot of reason to mix things up. I think it's just fun to ride different bikes. I think it's fun to get out on the mountain bike on trail. Uh, you know, big days on a gravel bike. Sometimes it's just fun to do that on a gravel bike on gravel roads rather than a mountain bike, so that you can put in 5 hours and cover a lot of ground, which just feels good.
Yeah.
And can be confident inspiring. But
So
you
don't
definitely
deprioritize fun.
Yeah, never.
Yeah.
I
That's a
think
good answer.
that should be one of the highest priorities.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Because I could see like the argument, if you're following a training plan, it might feel rigid. It might take some of the fun away. And so even from a coaching perspective, you try to find ways to keep it fun, keep it interesting.
It needs to be like, and you want to show up at the start line to an ultra, like stoked to ride your bike.
Right.
The worst would be being kind of burnt out from training that's too structured, or just not doing what you normally would be doing on the bike, and then get to the start line of a race where you need to ride for a dang long time and not be stoked to ride your bike.
Right.
That's
I think about that.
That would make it so hard. And so I tell people, anyone I work with, that like I would much rather have you show up to the start line with less fitness and more enthusiasm than the other way around. Like, it doesn't matter how fit you are. If you're tired of riding your bike, you're not going to have a good race and you're not going to enjoy it.
So good. So
But
good.
that doesn't mean you should stop training.
What was the last thing?
That doesn't mean you should stop training entirely.
No. Yeah. But that is something that I think about a lot, is like not taking the fun out of it. Like I want to show up excited to ride and not burn out from riding and fatigued. And so, yeah, I like that. I like that advice. All right, good. Let's let you move on to the rest of your evening with your partner, and hopefully some dinner or whatever y'all got planned tonight.
Yep, that's next. And I think we might watch, there's a little very draft version of a film about the expedition I did in Iceland earlier this year that I just got a link to. So I think we might watch that.
That sounds very exciting.
How it's coming together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had no idea it was coming together. So
little Christmas or a New Year present for you. Well, before I let you go, point people in the right direction, both to find Orogenesis and your own website. If people want to, like I mentioned, you do coaching, you have training plans, and you're just a great resource. So point people in the right direction.
Yeah. So for Orogenesis, go to their website. It's orogenesiscollective.org. And if you want to see a bunch of photos from that route, what it's like, I've done a kind of photo essay series on the Radivist, and those are all published for the US part of it at this point. So each of those has like 25 or 30 photos from along the way, so you can see what that's like. And the Baja ones are forthcoming as I get to that. And then for coaching training stuff, Ultra MTB is my coaching company. That's ultramtb.net. And there's a couple of training plans for bikepacking races, ultras that are on there. And you can get in touch with me about more personalized coaching if that is something you're interested in.
Awesome. I decided that I was trying to decide if I wanted to hire a coach for Doom, and it was kind of like what I alluded to earlier. Like, I kind of want to test my own arsenal and just kind of go at it my own. And part of that is like asking friends for advice, and which I just did. But and then like I want to kind of try that, and then I think it would be fun to hire a coach and like compare and contrast the difference. So
totally,
maybe we'll do that some other time. But thanks for coming on, Kurt. It is good to see you.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll be at least seeing you at the end of the year at West Texas Showdown, if not before then. But
that's still far off. Hopefully we cross paths somewhere sooner than that. But
that would be nice.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on here.
Always a pleasure, Kurt. Have a great evening.
You too, Patrick.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Later.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, I would highly recommend going back and listening to my previous 2 episodes that I did with Kurt Refsnider. Those are episode 67, where we talked about his Colorado Trail win in 2019. And I interviewed him again, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, for episode 167, where we talked about his Colorado Divide Trail ride that was 3,300 miles. Another completely crazy epic adventure, something that, again, he's only one of like 5 people to have ever done it. So if you want to hear more from Kurt, go check those out. And if you enjoyed this episode, maybe consider supporting this podcast over at Patreon. You can find out more at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. And don't forget to head over to oldmanmountain.com and check out their Atlas seat pack, now available in 12 liters. And they're also making their own Old Man Mountain cargo straps, available today at Old Man Mountain. Go check it out. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It is always a pleasure. And until next time, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.